Hello and welcome back to David Divine Broadcasted. Another Thursday night here. Welcome in, everybody. Hello, Bushcraft, Cashew, Dana, and others watching. Enjoy the show. Tonight's guest, we have John Vandeventer on. And John has a couple things going on with, or a lot of things going on with his book series that he's writing. And you can find him at relicsbooks.com and also here on YouTube. The links are pinned in the description below. Thank you very much, John, for being here. Also, John is a 16-year Air Force vet, I believe. John, thanks for your service.
Thank you.
John,
and thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. This should be fun. So tell us a little bit about Relic. We see the banners back there. Awesome banners. Relics books. Explain the Relics is the first series that you wrote, right? Relics was the first book.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, it was going to be one novel. And a friend of mine, as I was telling you earlier, up in Ohio, he wanted me to write a short story. And I don't know why he chose me. I'd never been a writer, but he wanted it about Bigfoot and he wanted to base it in Ohio. And I was kind of shocked. I didn't know anything about Bigfoot at the time. I'd never researched it or anything. And I thought, Ohio. And I said, I thought they were only in California. He said, no, I had an incident. He said, I actually saw one in Florida as a child. So that kind of interests me. And so I agreed to do it. I was a little intimidated at the thought. And so I started writing it. And he had a production company at the time who makes those 30-minute infomercials. They used to, I think they were more popular in the early 2000s. I don't see them as much anymore, but so he wanted a little film, and I was trying to write him a story, and he got a contract in California, and he had to drop the little project, which was kind of okay with me. I really wasn't enjoying writing at the time. And then my sister saw it. She was in from Arkansas, and at the time, I didn't know they had Bigfoot activity on their property, and they lived way out in the middle of nowhere. And she didn't tell me until the book was finished, but anyway, she talked me into making a novel, and so I really just dove into the subject. And man, there was all these just weird branches from the main subject. There was stuff like what they call the woo side, the more spiritual side, and I just thought it was a big monkey. And I'm finding out all this new information, and I kept thinking, well, I want that in the book. I want that in the book. I want that. Started hearing about government cover-ups, military operations. I thought, well, I'm going to put that in the novel. And so it came out to be, I think it's just short of 500 pages, the first one. And
wow.
It still didn't have everything I wanted to write about. There was a few more Bigfoot things I wanted to cover. So now my sister talked me into going on and making it a trilogy. So I dove in, and like I said, I never really knew much about Bigfoot, never paid much attention to it. I thought it was kind of a neat subject, but I was a UFO guy. When I was a little boy, I tore all the pictures of the airplanes out of the encyclopedia and got in trouble for that. But my thing was always stuff that flew. That's how I ended up in the Air Force, I guess.
Right.
And UFOs just fascinated me, I guess, because they flew and the possibility they were from outer space. And one year, a cousin I had, she was 10 years older than me. She gave me a book by Frank Edwards called Flying Saucers, Serious Business. And I was young. I was about 12, I think. And I read that, and I just flipped over the UFO thing. And that was always my big interest. So as I dove into the Bigfoot stuff, I kind of got hooked on it too. It became interesting. And that's where we teed off. And in the later books, I kind of start easing away from Bigfoot towards the UFO phenomenon. And it's been kind of cool because we moved to Oklahoma, where the setting for the book, all three books, the first three are all in Oklahoma, and the characters are all from Oklahoma. And there's just so much cool stuff up here. Like, I didn't know there was mountains in Oklahoma in the southeast part. I'd always gone straight north from Dallas, and I'd never been in this corner. And you got these beautiful mountains and just magnificent forest. And I just kind of fell in love with the place. And then I'd heard about the Siege of Honubi. That's a pretty popular Bigfoot story. So I just decided this is where, I was going to make the first book based it. Well, actually, it's north of here in Tallahena, because I needed some infrastructure for the story. I needed a police department, a hospital, restaurants. Well, Honaby here, we got a little store with a grill. We don't have gas pumps. It's 17 miles the nearest gas station. We're like 60 miles from a decent Walmart. Um, if you
Wow.
want something like pizza or fast food, you're out of luck, man, because it's about that same 60 miles to find a McDonald's or a Burger
A-
King or anything. So,
And
yeah.
I imagine where you came from in Texas, it was nothing like that,
Oh, yeah.
right?
You could go around the corner and get whatever you wanted. And here, it's kind of funny. I'll be watching TV late at night or something, and a pizza commercial will come on. I'm like, well, you can blow that idea off because it's not happening.
Right. Yeah. Where do these people live that have pizza? We don't have pizza
Yeah.
around here.
Yeah. But I love it. I mean, it's really peaceful. You get used to not seeing a lot of people, and it's then I'm going to, like, say, Fort Smith, Arkansas, and it's almost overwhelming if you don't get out much. It kind of reminds me of going from Sulphur Springs, where I was, to Dallas. It's just that big of a change. So, but really love it. It's just cooled off here. The leaves are starting to turn, and we actually have 4 seasons here, and just
Yeah.
120 miles away in Texas where I lived, it was just like cold or hot, and that was all you had. So
You're right.
really enjoy it here.
Yeah. I have a couple friends that live in Oklahoma, and they always, yeah, you pretty much you get the weather, and then 2 days later
Yeah.
we get the weather here in Ohio. And but that's funny that we talked about it a little bit backstage, that that's what got you started as a friend from Ohio.
Right.
Suggest, and then we said everything comes from Ohio. We've covered that on the show before. It either comes from Ohio, or it's someone we know brought it from Ohio, or something, or invented it, or what. So that's pretty neat that he asked you. That's what started this all. Was he asked you to write a story, or a short
Right.
story?
And I haven't spoken to him since. We used to, well, how we kept in touch, I was on being an airplane freak, I was on an online flight sim with World War II planes called Aces High. And that had been my main hobby for about 20 years. And when I started writing, I just didn't have time for it anymore. And so I just kind of gave it up, and, just drifted off in a whole nother world, so um, now I talk to Bigfoot people or UFO people or, other authors. So yeah, it's been a little bit of a life change.
Yeah, Bushcraft says all cool people come from Ohio. Bushcraft's also from Ohio. That's right, Bushcraft. Yeah. Thanks for the input. So, and then you said your sister, which when did she jump in to start encouraging you after you wrote the
Well,
first book?
they had come down. I had actually given up. My friend had a big contract come up, so there was no need to write the story. He didn't have time for it. And my sister was down visiting from Arkansas, and she was like my mother figure. I never knew my mother, and she was 9 years older than me. So, naturally, she read some of the stuff I had printed. She goes, "Oh, you got to make this into a novel." And I was like, "No, I don't want to do that." But, she kept after me, and so finally I agreed to do it. And that's how the first novel came out. And then two, then three, and then I did the Shadow Chasers series, which is more of a young adult series, but my adult book fans love the Shadow Chasers series too. Um, so I was going to get away from it, and I was going to have another series that was loosely, kind of a companion series to this. But I wanted to do a standalone UFO novel, and I started in on it, and I went with another twist on what these UFOs were. And I started thinking, man, this is going to be more than one book too. So I just gave up on it, decided to make it a series. And then I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, I really need this guy from Relics or this guy from Shadow Chasers. So I started pulling in characters and tied the series together now. So, but this is 10 years after the last Relics. The last Relics story ends in 2016, and this book picks up in 2015. And it's a new series called In the Fall. And I'm just about done with the first book. I'll be getting it to my publisher the next week, and hopefully 2 or 3 weeks from now it'll be ready to go on sale.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that. Now, and you've done all this writing in a short amount of time, right? The first Relics book was 2018, maybe, was it? Is
Well,
that right?
actually, the first, yeah, it published in 2017. I started in 2015, and it really, I mean, it didn't sell, but it was. I went with I went with one of those publishers you see on TV, and it really wasn't a good deal. I mean, they took royalties. They didn't promote the book or anything like that. And I
Yeah.
remember, there's people that may know what Nephilim are, and I was looking at that for subject in one of the books, and so I found this Nephilim page on Facebook, and there was a lady in there brought up some good points, and I asked her a few questions. One thing led to another, and I asked something I guess that must have been covered in one of her books, and she said, "Well, did you read my book?" And I was being a smart aleck. I said, "No, did you read mine?" Well, I didn't realize she was a publisher. She goes, "No, what is it?" And and then she goes, "I have a publishing company." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I kind of thought, well, I bit off more than I could chew.
Yeah, you never know who you're talking to. You never
Right.
know. You never
And
know.
so I was thinking about. I started on the second book and moved up here, and I lost the manuscript. Had to start over, and then I lost my oldest son. He had a real bad case of PTSD from Iraq, and I lost him in 2019. And then
Oh,
I lost
sorry to
my
hear.
sister about a year before that. And so I was just
Wow.
kind of had the wind knocked out of me, and I was about to give up. And I ran into this lady with Empire Publishing, and I thought, well, what the heck? I told her I'm going to try and get this second book done, and I'd like to publish it with you guys. So we agreed to that. And then I thought, you know what? I'm just going to republish the first one too under these guys. So I went to them, and things picked up immediately. Everything improved, and I just, I started making a little money. I was able to, instead of bringing it out of my own pocket, like Relics One. Once I went to Empire, I made enough money to publish Relics Two, and so each book's feeding the next book. So it's been pretty nice. And
That's awesome.
about 2 years ago, she told me one day, she said, your books are doing pretty good. The more books you write, the more money you'll make, and the less you're driving around as a copier tech 300 miles a day, the more time you'll have to write. So I thought
Right.
about it and went ahead and retired a couple of years early. I retired at 63 and started writing full time. So that's how it all came about.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you're writing a lot. And are you
Yeah.
happy? You're happy you made that choice, obviously.
Oh, I really am. I was really knocking them out for a little bit, and this book I'm about to release, I should have had done back in March, but I hit 65, ran into some health problems, and that slowed me down. And it just I'm not that young guy that can bounce back real quick anymore. And it's amazing if you're not feeling good how it's hard to write. It's hard to
Y-
get your brain engaged and
Yeah,
the creative side and stuff. So muddled through all that. Everything's doing good now and clipping right along. So hopefully I can catch up.
that's awesome. So, and it seems like you've tried to put yourself in the situation that you're writing the books about, the small town atmosphere with all
Right.
with all the activity.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, like I said, there's that. I first heard the story on Sasquatch Chronicles, and that was the one good thing about when I worked as a copier tech. I was so spread out. I was, driving 200 or 300 miles a day, so I had a lot of road time, and I could listen to podcasts, get ideas for the books, and do a little research. And I'd heard about this place, so I thought, well, I'll choose it. And like I told you just a few minutes ago, I ended up choosing Tallahena. And for the first 8 months I was writing a book, I never came up here. I just used Google Earth, and I was looking at everything. And one day I decided, well, you know what? I better go up there and take a look around and see if my writing's authentic to the terrain and everything. And
Right.
luckily it was. And it just so beautiful up here. I fell in love with it. And then after the first book published, like I said, I had the opportunity to move up here. So I came up here, and there's just material everywhere. There's a siege of Honabi. There's been Sasquatch sightings and little tales of, people getting run off and scared around Tallahena. And then for the third book, I used Heavener, Oklahoma, which is about 45 miles from here. And they have this big rock, man. It's shoved into the ground, and it's got these ancient runes on it. And they say it's Viking runes. I don't know for sure. But then I ran across a guy here in Tallahassee named Larry Taylor, and he was telling me about a story about the number 5 coal mine there, and how in 1928 these coal miners were deep down in there, and they came up
Mm.
on these polished cement columns and a cement wall underground, and the rock it was embedded in was 230 million years old. And
Wow.
so they told me that, and I'm like, writing about portals and UFOs and stuff now. And so I'm like, oh man. So, I based the book on that area. And I just find, interesting things where I can that, may have a little spooky tone to them, and build a story around it. And it, as much as possible, I use real events. Like in Relics 2, as I'm switching over to UFOs, I use a lot of references to Operation High Jump in Antarctica. I pull a couple of characters from that are older, of course. And, I mentioned the, what's his name? I can't think of it now. The first guy to report a UFO, Kenneth Arnold, and the Roswell case and stuff like that. So I was able to use those to write into the story and align these characters to them. And, that's a lot of fun for me. I never liked writing when I was young, but to build these stories around historic events it's a blast. I really enjoy doing it. And my
Wow.
my book fans, my readers, they seem to enjoy it too. And about the only grief I get from them is if I kill somebody they like. Well,
Don't
I
kill my
kill a
favorite.
character in the second book, and I'm still paying for it.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. Well, how can you let's think about have you thought about how can I bring them back and
Well, actually, they make cameos in the the Shadow Chaser series takes place between Relics 1 and Relics 2, so I get cameos there. And but and people ask me, why'd you kill this guy? Why'd you kill that guy? Well, because if he was older anyway, and if he didn't go, his son was never going to grow up. Because I meant for the son to be the main character, and his father became the main character somehow. So, but yeah, I got to be really careful who I kill off from now on. But I take that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
That makes me happy that people like the characters that much. I mean, if they're that invested, then I feel like
Yes.
I'm doing something right for them. And that's the whole point. I'm not going to get rich doing this, but I love that people enjoy the books. I mean, it really, that means a lot to me. So
Right. You never know, John. You never know. But you're doing something you love, and you're
yeah.
making quality products. Olivia, good to see you. Um, but that's awesome.
Hi, Olivia. That's a friend of mine out in
Uh,
Arizona.
oh, awesome.
Met them
Awesome.
through the book. Her and her husband Mike.
Uh, were they one of the people that were mad when you killed off their favorite character?
No, no. I don't know. Olivia hadn't said anything,
All
and
right.
Mike's an old Marine. I don't think he cares who I kill. So
Oh, all right. He's cool with it. But
yeah,
that's cool because the way that you're writing, uh, with enough science fiction in there, you can always bring somebody back. You can always
yeah.
bring
And
them
I had
back.
an interesting compliment. A guy who's really into all this stuff. Well, the guy I was talking about earlier that had told me about Heavner, Larry Taylor. He said, "I don't write fiction. I write faction." And I thought, well, that's kind of neat. I'll wear that badge then.
Yeah, right. Faction. Yeah. What? Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's something to promote. Maybe now on Operation High Jump. How did you work that into the story?
Well, I had a character. His name's Joshua in the show, but now I'm right in the heart of the Choctaw Nation here, so I use a lot of Choctaw terms. I use Choctaw characters, and I wrote this character in. He was a boy. He was a teenager when Pearl Harbor happened, and his cousin was in the Army Air Corps, was killed during a strafing attack at Henderson Field during the Pearl Harbor attack. So he wanted to avenge his cousin, so he was going to join the Army Air Force. Well, just before he was old enough to enlist, he went and saw the old John Ford um, movie about the Battle of Midway, where he did the what were those things called? The newsreels. And um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it made him want to be a naval aviator. So by the time he got through training and this and that, he'd missed the war. The war ended just before he got in theater, and so he still had 4 years to do. So he ended up being assigned as a pilot on the Philippine Sea during Operation High Jump. And so he encounters the UFOs they supposedly ran into there while he's flying his old F-8 Bearcat. So I just had him go on with his naval career, and he ends up encountering a UFO again while flying off Korea. And then there's a story in Vietnam about the HMAS Hobart. It's an Australian cruiser that was off the coast of Vietnam, and I think it was July '68 near Tiger Island, and they reported two UFOs. Supposedly, Air Force F-4s responded to it, fired a AIM-7 missile, and it ended up hitting the cruiser. And then there's allegations that no, something from the UFO shot the cruiser. So I just wrote in a couple extra F-4 Phantoms, only they were Navy ones, and it was Josh Nashoba, and he was lined up to get his captainship. He was going to be promoted and have his own carrier, as commander of a carrier. But because of this was like his third incident with UFOs, and now he's run into the government cover up, and the people don't want him around. They don't want him out there because he's seen too much. So he gets retired, moves back to Honubi, and then in 2014, he's an old man. His wife's passed away, but he gets caught up into the things going on in the original Relics book, and then he comes in Relics 2 and helps them out. So,
wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, great. Yeah. So again, John's link, relicsbook.com is in the description as well as his YouTube channel. So you said that you were into the UFOs before you started writing that short story, but not so much Bigfoot. Since then, have you had any sort of sightings in all your travels?
well, yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing because wherever we live, people either absolutely believe or they don't.
Right.
And I had been going pretty hot and heavy out into the woods that, when we first moved up here. And there's a place to the west here called Brown Springs. It's right on the Red River. And a lot of people go there, and a lot of people have had encounters and things. And I went up there. That was my second time. The first time I went up, I took my youngest son and my second oldest son. And my second oldest son's in a wheelchair. He was wounded in Iraq, lost both legs. Iraq was rough on his family, man.
Yeah.
And,
oh man, I'm sorry to hear that.
But he didn't want to get out. He was staying in the truck, and he just bought a Judge pistol. And he said, "Hey, if something comes up, I'll check out my new." So we're like, okay. And we ran down by the river. We didn't find anything, and I just didn't like the thought of leaving him at the truck by himself. So we didn't stay long. And I went back again over a weekend with a group of Bigfooters, and really nothing happened there. There was a few little weird things that happened, but nothing really tangible in my mind. And I remember coming back, and I was covered in tick bites and sugar bites. It was August 2018. It was first weekend in August, and I remember telling my wife, you know what? If these things exist, they're not at Brown Springs, and I don't think they're here either, because I never get a creepy feeling or anything like that. And I'd gotten creepy feelings in a place called Long Pool, Arkansas, where I went with another friend of mine twice, and we had a lot of weird stuff happen there. It was kind of spooky. So I thought, there's just nothing here. And I walked out the door 2 nights later. It was August 7th, 2018. And I was going out to look at Mars. Mars was real beautiful that summer. It was really close to the Earth. And I was walking out to look at that. And like I say, my whole focus has always been the sky, never the ground. And when I walked around my wife's car, I set off the motion detector, turned on the lights, outside lights on the house. And we own 4 acres of house it's on, and across the dirt road we live on, there's another acre. And I was looking up when those lights came on. I just saw movement to my left, and I look down, and man, this thing is bolting right in front of, right along my property line. And I mean, I measured it the next day. It was 100 yards, and he had to do it in like 3 to 4 seconds. I've never seen anything move this fast, and it was really weird. The weird thing about it was it didn't pump its arms. Its arms are like in a surfer's stance, like you see the old surfing movies and stuff. And then when I saw it leap, and when it leaped, that was the only time I saw it pump its arms. So, like I say, I saw it 3 to 4 seconds. I remember coming to the door and screaming at my wife, Monica. Monica, I saw a Sasquatch, and she looks into my eyes, and she's like, "Oh, John." She didn't believe me. So, with that being her reaction, I thought, I'm not telling anybody about this.
Yeah,
And
that's what we find. A lot of people don't say anything
yeah,
for that reason. Yeah.
but then the next day, I posted it on a Bigfoot forum in Facebook. Just see what people thought. And Wes Germer, who hosts Sasquatch Chronicles, was in there, and I didn't know he was a member of that group, but he invited me on his show. I was only on about 10 minutes, and I told him, I said, Wes, there's really no point in me being on his show, because his show is usually scary stories, and people have they come out of it scared or barely escaping. And
Yeah.
he's like, were you scared? And I'm like, well, no, because it was running from my left to my right about 80 yards from me, and it was pretty non-spectacular. The speed was the big thing. And I said, now had it been running at me, that would have been another story entirely.
Yeah, a whole different story. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, small community here, you kind of got to watch what you say or what you do. And like I say, there's people that say they've seen them, and there's my best friends, and I love them dearly. They live down the road, but if I talk about Bigfoot, they'll laugh me off the property. So it just depends on who you're talking to. But I thought, well, I'm going to keep it quiet. I'm never going to speak of it, because I'm trying to sell a Bigfoot book. And I didn't want people saying, oh, you're just trying to sell books. And,
Right.
but they're
Yeah.
right. I am. You bet I'm trying to sell books. That's what I
Right.
do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I sat on it for a couple of years and never mentioned it. I'd get on a podcast or something and never mention it. And then a couple of years ago, I decided, you know what, I'm coming out of the Bigfoot closet and just admitting it. And
Came
the
out of
funny thing is, about 3 months later, my wife saw one in the same area about the same time of night, but she had two other people with her. So she had two witnesses with her that saw it. I was there, but I was looking the wrong way. I thought I saw something somewhere else,
Mm-hmm.
So that's been kind of cool. My wife found a really nice print one day. Me and this other Bigfoot guy just walked right past it, weren't looking, and she goes, "Hey guys, what's this?" And we turn around, and there it is. And those kind of things leave me, I wonder, because there was other soft sand there, and it's funny, it's like, why just one print?
Right. Yeah.
That makes me wonder. I'm wondering, are people hoaxing, or what else is going on? It's hard to figure out, but
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting. But actually, it's there's a couple other things that have happened that makes me wonder. I've been real. I almost want to say, yeah, I've had 3 encounters, but I can't. I didn't see. I didn't have solid view of anything. I've just had whistles and snorts and yells and screams and something moving in the fog. So I don't want to say that's what they were, but
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, I know, like we said, a lot of people keep their sightings quiet just for that reason. Just to be, like you said, laughed off the property or ridiculed or whatever.
Well, the funny thing, there's an elderly couple lives about 2 miles down the road, and the guy lived here as a young man. And I say elderly, it's funny for me to say it. Anyway,
Yeah, right. Yeah. 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 That
and he
old man.
said that his father left when he was like 12 to 13. And, they were in bad shape. So his mother sent him up the mountain here with a gun and said, you need to shoot a deer. So we don't have anything to eat.
We got to eat, right?
Yeah. So he went up there, and he said, man, I had one of them things following me around up there. And I ended up going back to home. I didn't shoot anything, because he goes, every place I'd go, I'd see this thing. It was like just trailing me, and it scared him. Excuse me. And the funny part is, every time he tries to tell his story, his wife's like, "Oh, I've lived here my whole life. There ain't no Bigfoot." And he never gets to finish the story. And so the last time, I attempted to get the story out of him, she started that again. And I was like, "Hey, really want to hear the end of his story." And she goes, "Well, he didn't see no Bigfoot, but you know what? We saw a flying saucer one night on the way to Tallahena." And I don't know why it cracked me up. It's like, okay, he can't see a Bigfoot, but you can see a flying saucer. Gotcha.
I know. That's what's confusing. We get into this all the time with different guests or people making comments, right? Yeah, that some people believe in ghosts and that's it.
Yeah.
Everything else is off limits. Bigfoot. So yeah, I think well, some of it's if you experience it, right? And you can tell obviously when you're talking to somebody if they've themselves experienced it. Why would I want to take it away from anybody? If they
Well, why do you want to take it away? Plus, you know what? They're at least in my case, if I'm going to tell you my story, I'm trusting you. I'm like saying, okay, here it is. And some people, believe you, some don't. But it's just one of those things. Funny thing is, a couple of years later, I had a really, really awesome UFO sighting, and I was standing in the same place. And it was just one of those nights. We were having a meteor shower, so I was out watching for meteors. And I'm looking to the south, and all of a sudden I see this big glowing orange football just going along the sky. And I'm thinking, man, that one's huge. I thought it was a meteor. And but it kept going and it kept going. It didn't burn out and it was just moving kind of slow, and it went behind the mountains like it was heading toward a Broken Bow to our south. And I thought that was no meteor. So I called MUFON, and that was the first time I've ever done a UFO report. But I really want to report this. It was pretty impressive. And so the lady called me a couple of days later, and we went over everything. And she's like, "Well, there was an Airbus 300 or whatever to your north." And I said, "No, that would have been to my back. I was looking south." And she goes, "Well, are you sure it wasn't the Airbus?" And I told her, I said, "Lady, I was an airplane mechanic for 16 years. I knew what back in those days, I could tell an airplane by the engine noise what it was. And I definitely know what airplanes look like in the day and in the night. I've always been interested in them. And this was no airplane. So they classified it as an unknown. And it was kind of funny. 6 months later, I'm just looking through something on Google, something about UFOs. And there is the exact thing that I saw. There's a photo of it. And it was funny because there's a mountain and pine trees. I'm like, good Lord, it looks just like it does here, And I thought, I wonder if that has something to do with that kind of terrain, or because you hear of things like with volcanoes. There's people see UFOs, or they see these lights or balls of energy or something. And I was wondering if maybe it could be something like that. But I'll never forget, as I'm watching this thing, it felt like it had intent. I don't know why I want to say that, but it just seemed like it had intent to do something, or it was under control. I don't know what it was, but it was nothing I'd ever seen in my years in the Air Force or anything like that.
So you never did you went to investigate to catch up with it?
No, I didn't even try. Yeah, David, the mountains and hills and roads here, you can't get in a big hurry. So
gotcha. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, plus you're not going to catch anything flying in a car.
Right,
so.
Right. No, I just asked because I have just watched Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Oh yeah,
and that's the premise. That's how that movie starts. Yeah, they see a meteor, and then they go find it. And then they find these guys.
Well, funny story along those lines. And it was 2017 January, and it was a really cold night in Sulphur Springs, Texas. I think it was down to like 20. And I had worked late. When I came home, I got out of the car and I'm walking to the back gate. I'd go in and out the back door, and I looked over, and there's this big glowing white light. And I'm looking at that thing, and I'm like, man, what is that? And it just looked like it was hovering there. So I went in, laid down my paperwork, and I went back out, and it's still there. And I said, well, I'm going to go try to figure out what it's saying. And it looked like it was right over by the airport. We lived about 2 miles from the airport. So Monica jumped in the truck with me, and off we went, and it was freezing. And we get over to the airport. Well, now the thing's moved. It's over. It looks like it's over on the other side of town by the hospital. So we go over there. It's not there. Now we've completely lost sight of it. We're coming out of the hospital, and then there it is to our left, like within a half mile. So I drive over there. Some guy had gotten a ham radio or something for Christmas,
Yeah.
and he just got the power put up that day. And it was a beacon. It was just a solid white beacon on top of the tower. And I just thought it was funny because that's how much I pay attention to the sky. Is that was the first night he had it on, and I knew it didn't belong there. So I've always been that way about looking at the night sky. It just fascinates me.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, leave it to the ham radio. Yeah, I finally got my license. Do you have your ham radio operator license now?
Me, no.
No.
That one, no.
So
No.
much, do you have a ham radio? So much great information on there. There really is. I mean, yeah. Oh, yeah. Obviously, that you saw that repeater is there now, and yeah, just a bunch of great guys talking on ham radio around here. That's for sure, especially in a storm or something. But yeah, if something's going on, they're like an hour ahead of the news. You know, the ham radio operators just jump out of nowhere all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had a sighting too of something in the sky too, and just like you mentioned, I purposely did not mention it because of that, you know, because people would have said, "Oh, you're making it up or whatever." But in that case, someone else like a half hour later put it on Facebook. The exact
really?
Yeah, they live near me. They saw it and they put it up, and I wrote them and said, "Thank you." I left it off because I didn't need the ridicule, you know.
Right. Well, I understand. I mean, it's no fun when you take it, but then, you know, I'm getting to the point in my life like, well, you can think what you want to think. It's, you know, it's okay. And, you know, I hear a lot of people like, I get a lot of Bigfoot pictures sent to me and stuff, and Bigfoot jokes and Bigfoot memes. And there's days I'm just like, oh God, people, please quit sending this stuff. And it was really bad when I was working because once everybody found out I was writing a book about Bigfoot, it didn't matter. There was a novel, man. You know, the gang piling was on. And so it just gets, sometimes you just kind of get tired of it. But it's amazing how when you do see something, you know, it kind of changes your whole outlook. And you know, and then you'll start paying attention a lot harder, and doesn't really pay off. I haven't seen anything else by paying closer attention. I will say one thing though, on the debate about why people say, well, nobody ever gets a photograph or a good photograph. And I was coming home from work from Texas one day, and I was coming through the mountains south of here. I was about 11 miles away, and it was spring. And I'm coming up the mountain, I see these 3 bear cubs running along the road. And one of them starting to cross, so I pull over and reach over, and I get my phone, put it on camera, and put it up. And by the time I get my phone up, they're gone. All 3 have crossed, and they weren't in that big of a hurry. You know, they weren't in a panic run. They were just like in a little gallop, maybe, but they were gone that quick. You know, and if people encounter them and don't get a photograph, that's why. Unless you're walking around with a camera ready to go, you know, nature happens so quick. It's just.
Yeah, we've talked about that with people on here before where, all right, well, if you're going out, make sure you have the camera on all the time. But yeah, I know situations like we talked with my experience, or I have videotaped in Vegas before, but here, same thing. You go out there, and last thing you're thinking about is videotaping. You go in and get the camera, and then it's gone.
Right. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
And yeah, people ask me, you know, when I saw the UFO, when I had the sighting of the Sasquatch, did you run it? Well, no, because it was gone before I could think about going anywhere else. And you say Vegas, you were out there 10 years. We've got a quick Vegas story for you. When I was a young airman, it was 1979. I think I was a 1-striper, and I went on my first temporary duty, and it was to Nellis out there north of Vegas. And I remember we flew in at night, and they put us in billeting, and you know, it's dark out there. You can't look around. And I'd never been out there. And I woke up the next morning, and I looked out the window, and I thought I was on the moon. I was like, good Lord.
Yeah.
I had no idea that's what it looked like there.
Yeah.
Just didn't have
Yeah.
a clue.
When I first moved out there, I had a friend that he said this, you're going to find that it's like living on the moon here because the city's built in a circle and
Yeah,
it's all surrounded by mountains, and so, and it does look like the moon. It's dusty and
right.
yeah. And the minute you drive out of town, it's nothing really. It's just the middle of the desert. It does look like the moon. But Nellis, yeah, we were there. But when I was out there, I was on top of the stratosphere, the hotel there, and they had an observation deck, and I filmed, lights falling from the sky.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that one they tried to explain as night parachuters,
Uh-huh.
but you know, and I didn't know whether I believed it or not, but recently in the last couple of years, I have Googled it and YouTubed it, and tons of other people filmed it all the way to Arizona. The Arizona lights were that time too.
Right. Yeah.
So tons of people were seeing it and filming it from different locations. But
Do
yeah,
you are you familiar with this Rendlesham Forest story and RAF Bitwaters in England back in 1980?
no, no,
Well, supposedly, if you ever want to look it up, there was a big UFO sighting over 2 nights at American Air Base RAF Bentwaters there in England. And if you turn on the History Channel or Ancient Aliens or UFO Hunters, sooner or later you're going to see this story.
okay,
I remember I was stationed over there in 1980. I've been there a few months, but I wasn't at RAF Bentwaters. I was at an F-111 base, RAF Upper Hayford, and we were about 70 miles or so from Bentwaters. And we had just had a NATO tag about, and that thing's a bruiser, man. They put you through it for 2 weeks. They come in, put you under wartime conditions, and you just go for 2 weeks. And we'd come off of it, and we were tired. And it was a holiday week. It was the week between Christmas and New Year's, so they were giving us all time off, because we'd really earned it for once. And well, England was a pretty good boondoggle, man.
oh
Anyway,
yeah,
I one night during the middle of it, we weren't supposed to be on duty. They had a recall. They recalled our squadron. We had to go out. We started getting our planes ready. Now, see, we had a nuclear strike commitment on the F-111s, and nobody knew why. And I remember this gruff old tech sergeant named Sergeant Lindsay. He called me Van Puke and a few others. He was this
Van
guy.
Puke.
He was
Van
old school, yeah. I ain't gonna tell you some of the other names he called me, but at least they always started with Van. But
Yeah, that's nice. Van
and I
Puke.
asked him, I says, "Hey, Sergeant, what's going on? What we get recalled for?" And he goes, and I remember him saying, "Oh, them retards out at Bentwaters are getting visited by the saucer people." And I never knew what that meant, I was like,
Right,
what's he talking about? But I was too scared about him to ask any more questions. I
right,
just ran
right.
along and got to my airplane.
You get a
And,
new nickname. Yeah, constant new
yeah,
nickname.
I'd get a new one. And I'll never forget, I'm back in the States, In fact, this is after 94, after I got out of the Air Force. And I'm seeing all these things about this UFO sighting at RAF Bentwaters. And come to find out, it was the same night. It was December 28th, 1980. It was the same night this thing happened there. So I've always wondered if those were connected somehow, because if they were actually getting their airspace penetrated and things landing, on the airbase or in the airbase property around there, that was the height of the Cold War. Things were pretty touchy. So I could see them putting us on alert in case it was some reason we had to get our birds off the ground, because we were a pretty big nuke target for the Russians there.
Wow. How's it like living in that condition? Uh,
Well, here's a funny thing. I'd been on little O2 prop planes for about a year before I got sent to England.
yeah.
And the thing was, if there's ever any kind of problem with munitions, armed or something, some kind of problem where munition could detonate, they clear everybody out for 2,000 yards, except the EOD people or the weapons guys. I nearly said weapons puke, but so I'm sitting in the
Van,
shack there, and
Van Puke.
yeah, Well,
That'll be stuck in my head now for sure.
yeah. Well, the funny thing, they always told us, hey, if you see the weapons pukes running, don't ask questions, just run with them.
Just go.
So I'm
They
sitting
got
in
the
the shack
weapons.
and we get a ground emergency. One of the planes in the Victor Alert, that's the planes that are nuke loaded 24/7, has some kind of issue with one of the weapons. And so they're calling a ground emergency and this and that. And there's Tech Sergeant Lindsay again. He's over just doing his paperwork and I'm doing mine. And so I start, folding my folder up. I'm like, Sergeant Lindsay, don't we have to get like 2,000 yards away? And he looked at me and said, it's a Victor Alert bird, you puke. Do you think 2,000 yards is going to do it? Because he goes, you might as well just sit where you're at.
Might as well just sit right here, puke.
Yeah,
We're done either way.
there you go.
Man, that's crazy. But obviously you get used to it.
Yeah.
Bigfoot more. Good to see. I mean, you don't get used to it, but I imagine at first you had to be, looking around constantly.
Well, David, you may remember. I don't know how old you are, but we kind of grew up in that era.
Yeah.
You had
Oh,
duck
yeah.
and cover commercials and this and that. So,
Yeah.
plus, where I grew up in Texas was near Dallas, and we had Carswell Air Force Base, Dallas Naval Air Station. We had Texas Instruments.
Yeah.
I probably grew up in a target rich environment. So, it never really, I don't know. It would be better to take a direct hit than, be 200 miles down, down breeze down, downwind, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And now that you say that, I thought about that the other day. I thought about compiling a list to make a small video of growing up in the 70s. But the first one that comes to mind is a show that was set in the 50s, but in the 70s was one example of how they always had our mind on nukes.
Yeah.
The first show that came to mind was Happy Days. Remember
Right.
if you ever watched that, they built a bomb shelter. And then, and this is a situation comedy, it's a sitcom,
Right.
but they're dealing with that situation. And then of course, they're, people are trying to be their friends. So they have a spot in the bomb shelter, but I just thought about
it was all over the place.
Yeah. It was just constant in everything.
What was that movie? Dr. Strangelove and
oh yeah.
the Russians are coming, and there was all those movies. Failsafe. We were pretty inundated with that stuff in our childhood.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, I want to highlight this. Bigfoot says, I got to give a shout out for John's Relics series. Excellent books.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, we'll have to definitely check those out. Again, the links are in the description if you're watching now or in the future. Click on those and check out. The premise of these books are great. We've talked about the Relics ones where you can kill off people, you can kill off characters, but we know that it's science fiction. You can bring them back. You can bring them back somehow.
There you go. Well, the thing of it is, I thought about it. I like the idea that nobody's safe. I mean, to me, if the guys are just going to come through everything and never it gets kind of boring. I like the tension that, hey, anybody can die in these books. So, I mean,
Yeah, that's great. David, relax. Devil Dog's telling me to relax. I'll calm down, Devil Dog. All right. So we got the Relics books that I'm interested in. These books do sound awesome. I do gotta pick these up. I got to build a new bookshelf for just guests that we have on here because we got all these talented people writing books, and you're no exception. But then after that, you wrote those 3 books, and then you went into the young adult. You wrote
the Shadow Chasers, and I kind of call it Relics Light. There's little less violence, not as much violence. Stories aren't as long, and it's about 3 kids that are junior high students at Tallahena Junior High. And the first book, they encounter a Sasquatch down on Rock Creek that's there in Tallahena. The second book, they have UFO encounters with gray aliens. And then the third book in the series, they're dealing with an Ishkatini, which is kind of a Choctaw skinwalker, only instead of like a wolf or werewolf, they're like an owl. So I made the thing like a man-sized owl man that was terrorizing the town for a few nights. And
Oh, that's awesome. Have you seen those pictures? I don't know where I just saw it recently, Twitter or X or wherever. Someone had pictures of somebody standing next to a bird-like creatures
no, I didn't check that out.
in Antarctica. It was recent. I saw it today.
Well, Antarctica's a weird place. There's a lot going on down there, supposedly.
Yeah. Uh, sounds like a fun adventure series for young people. Yeah, who knows what's going on down there?
Yeah, I used it pretty heavy in Relics 2 and 3. Actually, I have a base the Germans started down there, and it's been taken over by a fallen angel who's still using these people, and he's shipped them where he can keep them alive at his whim, and he's still got the scientists and people like that working for him down there. So,
which book is that in? These books
that starts in Relics 2.
See, these you got me hooked already.
Well, good.
Yeah, these are good. I'm going to promote these books. Yeah, I love the stuff. I love the premise, but I love science fiction, and I like the fact that you're taking real events and using your imagination with it. Did you always have an imagination like this, or you said you didn't even like to write?
I did. I think, it was easier to think of an interesting life than build one.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, well, I don't know if it costs less money, but maybe less injuries. You can sit at home. Like Bukowski said, they said, after hundreds of books, they're like, your writing's good. And he's like, yeah, I made enough money. I pay someone to write them now.
Yeah, there you go. Well, it's kind of concerning for me now. I hear about this AI that will write a book for you. And I'm like, oh, man, I hope people aren't doing that. But then the publisher told me that if you do that, you have to tell them on Amazon the book was written with AI.
AI.
Yeah. I mean, I think, of course, I'm going to say this because I'm a writer, but I think you put more than words in a book, when, there's a lot that goes into it, and you get, the person's, a lot of people put their own spirit into a book. Most of the characters in my book, that people love them so much, well, I base them on people I know, a lot of them,
Yeah, I was going to ask that earlier. If you're finding all new characters to write about,
the honorable ones and the not so honorable ones, you run into all kinds of people over the course of your life, and a lot of them make good novel material.
yeah. I forget who wrote this song. Yeah, Pimps and Preachers, and the premises. I learned a lot from both. Right.
There you go.
Yeah. Agree completely. There's more to a book than words. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like the way that AI. Although we have a friend, Kelly, who comes on here, and he'll take books and then put those words into AI to make pictures to explain the story that that you might already see in your mind visually. He puts it in. He would take your book, Relics, put in a couple chapters, and it would spit out images for the book, which I appreciate that. But yeah, I don't know about letting the AI write the book for you. That's
I don't either. Well, it just seems like cheating, but who knows?
That's where we're at, though. But I'm sure that. But yeah, there's so much. There's personal. So how do you start writing? Do you write with cursive on a piece of paper, or are you tapping it out on the?
I'm on a laptop.
You're on a laptop.
And I use Windows Word, and I don't know how people did it before. I couldn't imagine using an old typewriter or writing out by hand. It would drive me nuts. And it's really nice. I mean, it's got to be so much easier to be a author now than say 40 years ago, because I'm on my laptop and I get to a point where I want to use something in the novel and I need some information on it. Man, bang, I hit Google, I go down, I read up specs or whatever I need and pop them right in. And that is so handy. Even like I told you with the first book, I used Google Earth to describe the terrain and everything. That wouldn't have been available to me, if I'd started writing say in the 80s or 90s. So a
Right.
little, I'm spoiled now without AI compared to what, look at what guys like Stephen King and Dean R. Koontz and those guys had to do.
Yeah.
Tom
Yeah.
Clancy, I mean, he had to sit through all those James fighting ship books to get specs for his novels. So yeah,
I want. I wonder if there are still writers who use a typewriter just because that's what they're comfortable with. I
the
wonder
last
if
one I saw do it was James Caan on Misery, and you saw how that worked out.
right. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I'm doing 30 days of horror movies this month.
Are
I'm
you really?
hoping. Yeah, last month I did sci-fi. They make these advent calendars, and each day you pull open a door and you try to find that movie. And I found a lot of great science fiction, but this month I'm doing horror, and I hope that movie comes up because I haven't seen it in a while. Misery is the name of that movie.
Yeah, Misery, right?
Yeah, she made sure he didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, she did.
Good
And see,
evening,
there you
Lakeway.
go. That's a Stephen King novel. I mean, that guy's imagination is something else.
Yeah, yeah. And then, all right, so we only have like 5-10 minutes here. So let's touch on the new book. The new book's a standalone, or you have characters from the first
Well,
three
the new
books.
book, it was gonna be a standalone, and then I started looking at it, and I'm like,
You told me that. Yeah.
it's gonna be a series. And then I thought, you know what, I really need some of the characters from Relics, and I could use a couple of characters from Shadow Chasers. So I started pulling them in, and the premise is, it's 2025. We get this burst transmission from Canis Minor, and from the star there, Leuchten B, and Leuchten B is the planet around that star. And
Man, you got me hooked again. You got me hooked
well,
again. All right.
we get a
Keep going.
message for them to that there will be another transmission in 18 days, and but they want the device at CERN up and running when they send the next transmission. And so they're looking at, well, why 18 days? Why can't we just do? Well, they figure out 18 days. That's how long a year is for that little planet, because the star is a red dwarf, so they're going to be where they can't transmit. And they're trying to figure out, how did this thing come instantaneously? Because in fact, the prologue of the book, we send radio message out to this planet, and it's not there yet. It's still got 4 years to get there, and we get an instantaneous message from them. So they're having a hard time figuring all this out. So they go through the jump the hoops. They get CERN to cooperate and got it up and going and have it ready 18 and a half days later.
And you're saying CERN, right? You're saying CERN.
CERN, yeah, CERN,
So
Super
you're putting,
Hydro
yeah,
Collider. Yeah,
you're putting a hydro collider in this book.
yeah.
I'm hooked. I'm hooked already.
Well, good. Well, this was not ready yet, but it'll be ready in November. I'll let you know when it.
I know. I was going to bring that up when you're done. I'll let you finish talking about it, but I don't know if you're going to have any physical copies. But if you are, I need to have you send me a signed one.
Yeah. Well, I was going to suggest. I appreciate you having me on. So don't buy Relics. I'll send you a copy if you'll give me an address once the show.
Wow, that's incredible. Wow. Yeah. I mean, you have me hooked. This is right up my alley. But anyway,
it's going to be it's a UFO kind of, in the kind of the vein of the old UFO movies where they come and try to take over, but it's got a twist. It's got a different twist. They seem very benevolent when they first show up, and they get a lot of people fooled right off the bat. Plus, America gets into it with China between the time they get the first transmission and the second. I'm not going to say what happens at CERN, but in that 18 days, America gets involved in a shooting war with China over Taiwan, and there's this new kind of very popular politician from, I'm not going to say we're in Europe either. I don't want to give too many spoiler alerts. But America gets rocked pretty bad, and we're kind of shunned by the rest of the world. All of a sudden, everything's getting blamed on America, so we're kind of getting pulled back. We're losing all our imports. we're not doing our own oil, we're not doing our own thing because we've been importing everything, and all of a sudden the world's mad at us and they don't want to send us anything. So that's how things are starting off. And yeah, these guys are coming, and there's
Wow.
going to be 3 books. So
That sounds incredible. What a great premise. Susie, good to see you. And also Mike, good to see you, Long Island Bigfoot. What's shaking? What's shaking, Mike? Wow, that's incredible. So when is that? That's going to be released?
it'll be
In November.
mid-November, I'm thinking. I've already busted a couple of days. So you know, I'm going to send it in by the end of this weekend to Francesca, my publisher, and hopefully she'll have some mercy on me and they'll get started on it next. So.
Yeah, yeah. You should. I hope she did. I hope she doesn't see this. She should be like, you should be writing, John. You should be.
Well, actually, I kind of about finished writing today. I'm just going to do some editing and get everything packaged up to ship in. So
now, one more question, and then we'll wrap up and promote your stuff. And then I really appreciate you being on. But when you talked about the book publisher a while back when we first started talking, did you say that she mentioned Nephilim to you?
Yeah.
She was writing about the Nephilim, or
well, she studied it and stuff. Now she's written a couple of books, and she's got her and her partner have co-authored a book. I'll get you the name of it too. It won't come to mind right away, but looks into some of that stuff. And I was looking into that stuff. In fact, the name of the next series is Nafal. You know, if you want to take anything with that. And
gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, she was into that, and we'd gotten into a discussion over it, and then we got into the have you read my book? No, have you read mine? And then I found out she was a publisher. So
incredible stuff. Who do you have different artists doing the artwork on your book
actually
covers?
Steve with Empire did that one. He did the very first one. The second one I hired an artist for.
Yeah.
And I wanted a Bigfoot and a triangle UFO on the and she could not get a triangle UFO for whatever reason. So I said, okay. I just paid for it, and I got the image, and I went into my Photoshop and, you know, took her UFO out and drew my own in, and then drew rays coming down and stuff. I'm like, I'm not paying for this anymore.
yeah, right. Do it yourself. You got to take matters into your own hands sometimes. Right. Excellent. That's excellent. Well, I really appreciate you being here tonight, John.
I really enjoyed it, and thank you. It was nice to talk about the books. I get so many shows. I mean, I enjoy being on the shows, but it's usually all about paranormal from beginning to end, and it was kind of fun to talk about the books, and I appreciate you letting me plug them.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and believe me, I'll continue to do so. Again, it's in the links below, John's .com info and John's YouTube info. So go subscribe if you haven't subscribed, if you're watching now or in the future, and check out these Relic books. So interesting. And yeah, I'll definitely keep promoting them, John, because they're fascinating stuff. And I appreciate it. And I'm glad we got to talk about the books. I'm way into that sort of stuff. And I'm glad we gave you a break and you got to just kind of chill out and promote.
Yeah, it was fun. Enjoyed it.
All right. Well, thank you, John. I'll see you backstage. Everybody, thanks for watching. And we'll catch you next time. Thank you, John.
Thank you, sir.